never break, always fight, never quit, do it right, play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain, live the grind, I could change, in my mind, pick a lane, commit and climb, the only way to win at life. I never miss, that's fact, taking big swings, hand to the bat, put me in the ring, you'll go out in a bag, cause I sing what I mean and I bring it to the mad light. Ain't got time to kill, I got time to feel, I took a red pill, I know life's short so I wanna live real, but how's it supposed to feel? How's it supposed to feel? How's it supposed to feel? They wanna say my name, but they holding back. They wanna say they hate, but they know it's cap. I ain't play no games, I just do that's fact. And I don't feel no shame, it's a mood you lack. I go crazy, nah, but I ain't lazy. Track after track, I work on this shit daily. Pass me the jack, right as fuel, got me hazy. About to unpack all these shit I've been chasing. I've got visions in my head, like memories after death. To be a legend instead of something you can forget. I'm living up every breath, I'd rather lead than be led. I'll fill the seats as I spread with every word that I've said. How's it supposed to feel? How's it supposed to feel?
Alright guys, so I suppose at this part of the build, it's about time we started talking about exactly what hardware we're using for this engine, for the iron block. So, we've got here a GM LY6 iron block, 6 litre block. So this block was actually sourced by the owner, Brock, from Victoria. He actually swapped his LS3 for this iron block and some heads and a heap of cash his way. He got out of it really well. For anyone that's watching this that are looking to source their own iron blocks, we get ours from Luke at Soham Custom Supply on the north side of Brisbane there. We've been getting actually quite a few from him lately. There's one right behind me here. And this is definitely the best way to go if you want a cheap start to a high horsepower engine. So the alloy gen floor blocks, they're really, really strong, they're really great, and they're really light. But if you can afford the weight disadvantage, the iron blocks are much, much stronger. There's a lot more meat there, and they're much more resistant to block twist. Even the Gen 4 alloy blocks, once you start getting to that 1000 horsepower sort of area, you do start to generate quite a bit of twist on the block. And what we do find is they do end up getting some hairline cracks down the mains. So iron blocks definitely the way to go for quick, cheap, high horsepower. The crank that's gone in this thing is a factory GM LS8 crank. All of the regular LS, the aspirated LSs were a nodular crank, which they're not quite a cast crank. It's a little bit of a different process to cast, but you know, it's a bit stronger than cast, but it's not quite as strong as being forged. Even those nodular cranks, a lot of people send them well over 1000. So these forged cranks sleep well at night, every night. Not that this thing's over 1000 horsepower, not a problem. So factory LSA forged crank, which for a little while there we could get at a really good price. They've since actually got a little bit harder to get. So basically what we used here is pretty much, at the time when we ordered all these parts, was the best and cheapest way for us to build an engine that was capable of 1000 horsepower at the wheels. Not that we actually intend on tuning this thing to quite that potential. I think Brock's gearbox is rated at about 800, and there is a few little things different that we would have done. There's a few little things that we would have done a little bit differently if we were definitely aiming for that 1000 horsepower, but we just wanted it to be safe for that number really. So anyway, along with the crank, we've got some Callie's Compstar H-beam rods. It's coupled with some Diamond 30 thou over pistons. So we actually originally had ordered some 10 thou over pistons. When Brock got the block from down south, we just got him to send us some photos of the bores to us, and we sort of, just from looking at them, we talked about it and we thought hopefully they'll clean up at 10, and we ordered some pistons because getting pistons at the moment is a huge weight. So we ordered some pistons, they got here. Unfortunately the block didn't clean up at 10 thou, so we kept those ones, and we ordered some 30 thou overs because 30 thou overs are much quicker to get than anything else at the moment. They're sort of a more common size that people have on the shelf, so it's a much smaller wait time for 30 thou. So iron blocks, got heaps of bore meat. There's no issues boring these things that far. This thing is completely happy days. So the rods and pistons came from our boy George there at RaceMax Direct, so a huge thanks to RaceMax Direct. He's been a huge help with sourcing a lot of this stuff from over in the States because it's so hard to get in Australia right now. So the Compstar rods, there are a lot of people out there that are pushing huge power through these rods, making huge powers out of these rods. Was it GMH Power, that Tirana?
Quinton Feast.
Quinton Feast, pink Tirana. He was making like 1400 wheel with Compstars, these exact rods. So, not that we'd push these rods that far, we wouldn't recommend pushing them that far, but more than happy that, you know, this thing is definitely rated for that 1000 wheel horsepower. So the LSA is actually an 8-bolt crank as well. It's not the regular 6-bolt, so that's one thing to watch out for. So Brock's had to buy a new flex plate to suit his Turbo 400. And probably one of the main things we would have done if he was absolutely set on making that 1000 wheel horsepower is we would have actually got this crank end block machine to take a Torrington thrust. So a Torrington thrust is like a 360-degree thrust bearing, which they normally machine into the snout of the crank and the front main cap on the block. And what this does is basically support a lot more force from the back of the crank pushing forward, which is because when you get gearboxes and converters and stuff starting to get built for that really high horsepower area, your line pressures start to get really high. And what you can see is you can start to see converters ballooning, or even just converters pushing on flex plates really hard because of high line pressures. And what this can do is obviously all that force on the back of the crank from that line pressure and that converter ballooning, if it's not up to the task, is really just pushing all that force straight into the thrust bearing, and you do find that these regular thrust bearings can start to wear out quite prematurely because of that. So for that reason, you know, a Torrington thrust bearing is a really good idea if you are planning to go to that sort of way, but it does add a significant amount of cost of machine work, which is why for this particular engine, if we were sort of looking at around that 800 wheel, we thought this one should be pretty right without it. We discussed it with the customer, and it was decided to pretty much leave it on this one just because he didn't want to incur that extra cost. So the cam that's gone in this thing is a Crow Cams 1287, straight off the shelf grind. This is the cam that we put in that blue VF Ute Mortal. We've put it in quite a few. It's rectangle port LSs. It's a really nice cam, aspirated and boosted. So we're a pretty big fan of this cam. So it's a 227, 244, ground on a 114 lobe. It's got a nice little bit of lift without being too severe on the valve train, and it's just a really nice little cam that works really well. The heads, these are the heads that Brock swapped his LS3. They came with the block, and we've got our pack dual springs, retainers and locks on them as well. As with all of our LSs from this shop, CHE trunnion upgrade in the rockers, brand new rocker posts. It is, you know, it's all happy days here. So we've got ARP main studs, ARP head studs, we've got our dual row timing set, we've also got our custom CNC'd LS2 style timing wedge for a dual row setup from SP Automotive Engineering, who also did all of the machine work on the engine for us. So huge big thanks to the boys there at SP Automotive Engineering in Deception Bay. Always do a absolutely awesome job. Always stoked with their machine work. So this is the little dude here. So LS2 style timing wedge, but for a dual row. These things are awesome. We've been using them quite a lot. So outside of that, we've got GM LS7 lifters and lifter buckets, 80 thou push rods. We've got a front timing cover from Killer Boost that has already got the turbo return, oil return welded into the front timing cover. So this was going to work with his fab setup and his turbo setup, so we're putting that on the engine as well. He's obviously got his conversion sump for the HZ, and he's got a Holley intake manifold and everything down there ready to go on this thing. So we're basically just going to sort of build it, seal it all up. At this stage, try and get it sent down to him, ship it down there. He's going to get it in the car, finish off everything he's got to get finished off, and then I think what we're going to probably try and do is meet somewhere halfway to use a hub dyno to tune this thing. So we'll probably fly down he'll tow it up and we'll sort of meet somewhere in the middle to tune this thing on a hub dyno, because it's probably not worth him towing it all the way up here for us to try and do it on the rollers. It's really bordering that horsepower and power area where it's going to be really hard to tie down and get traction and do properly on the rollers. It'd be a lot nicer and safer to do on a hub. So if we've got to hire a dyno anyway, it may as well be further south, closer down to him. So for this thing, obviously we went with the standard 3622 stroke, because at the time it was a lot easier for us just to get the LSA crank. You know, to go a 4-inch stroke crank and get anything that was as strong in comparison was going to be a lot more money, a lot of extra cost. And this thing is turboed, so we figured just more boost, rev it, happy days. So Rex is just dialing in the cam now, doing some cam measurements, dialing in, do piston to valve and everything as goes together, do all our other checks, and get this thing on its way down to its new home in its fat as HZ panel van. Thing is cool ass.
I don't really know what comes next. I'm just doing my best, even though I'm so stressed out. Everything just feels like a test that I fail, so depressed when I can't seem to get out. But something deep inside won't let me quit. I swear that I'm inspired by all this shit. Tell me that I can and I won't. That's what guides me the most. Your lies, I'll do what I want. I'm inspired by thirst, I'm inspired by worth. I desire your worst, so you can just hide while I work. I ain't tired, you first. I'll write a second, third verse about the lies you go disperse. You never did shit, I know it hurts. But something deep inside